this report discusses also the, I would say, over-hasty tightening of the monetary policies by, for example, like European Central Bank that started in April this year. And now there are demands all around that the ECB may need to retract some of these policies. And also not only because that this tightening up of the monetary policies might not have actually been very effective, because in fact the price increases in food and energy commodities actually did not result mainly from the rise in demand. It was not actually pressure from the size of demand increase, but mainly was a consequence of excessive speculative activities by the financial investors, as has been raised by UNCTAD times and again in this report in a very analytical and rigorous manner. I would summarize all this chapter by saying that there are a few key areas that this report has given out as very strong warnings as to how we should be dealing with this nascent recovery in order not to let the recovery drop back again and to go into another round of recession, as we are coming close to that kind of point.
In Japan, it was the same thing, that after the deleveraging that broke out when the bubble had burst, then we had, on the one hand, the private deleveraging, and we had, on the other hand, a permanent attempt to cut all costs, and from the government to cut budget deficits. You know where Japan has ended with these policies. After 20 years, their overall public debt has risen from 50% in 1990 to more than 200% now. This is the scenario that is realistic. Let's not fool ourselves. This is a realistic scenario for the whole developed world, if we do not understand the lesson right now and very quickly, because we do not have other instruments anymore. To revive the economy with a wageless recovery, with diminished expectations of the private sector, of the private households, what are the instruments at hand? There's nothing. Monetary policy, the interest rates are everywhere zero, and if governments stick to the policy of not only keeping fiscal deficits where they are, but retrenching, cutting public expenditure, then we will end up in a permanent recessionary mode. That's absolutely unavoidable, because there is no other force. There's nothing that falls from heaven and that would create growth from out of nothing, I don't know where. Look at Greece. The best example is Greece. Now, 2 years after the experiment, where they started the experiment of cutting expenditure in the midst of a recession, without any positive stimulus, without any positive momentum from elsewhere. And the Secretary General mentioned Argentina and other countries in Asia when they did the same. But they at least had a stimulus from a devaluation. They had a stimulus from a devaluation in a still flourishing world economy. Now Greece has nothing, has no devaluation. They have just cutting the expenditure. They have just raising taxes, and they're cutting wages. So where should this economy go? It can only go deeper into recession. And what happens if the economy goes deeper into recession? Deficits rise, and they do not shrink. And if people now in Europe, I really cannot understand this anymore, if people in Europe say, do the same, you got the wrong medicine, you're sicker than before, take more of the same medicine, and forget about the consequences. I don't know where we are going. This is ending in a disaster. If we do not understand that very quickly, we're ending in disaster, for sure. Because there is no stimulus from nowhere. And as the Secretary General also said, we have in the developing world, we still have a bit of growth. This growth mainly depends, again, on our view, namely that their wages are rising. People still have positive income expectations, so they have domestic demand. They have the expectation of a growth in domestic demand. That's why investment is still there. But if 70% of the world economy go into a recessionary mode, that will not help at all.